Wherever there is an artistic expression, there's going to be unpredictability, there's going to be innovativeness, there's going to be pushing boundaries, because art is a pulsating, thriving flow of river.
I can't beat Korean guy at Korean. I can beat the Korean guy in Hindi or Punjabi. Translating that into textiles, well, I can't do what they have been doing in their traditional format. And I can't play on their strengths. I have to play on my strengths.
In Indian context, we've been labeled in India, the more is less compared to Japanese sensibility with less is more or Western philosophy. And why not? Isn't it the beauty?
It's a pleasure to be here today, and it's an honor to be in this extraordinarily wonderful panel. And I think there's a lot to share, to think about, to discuss. To me, briefly, to just start the day, one is that Indian aesthetics is a plural idea. Is there one thing that we are thinking about? Are there many things that we are thinking about? What are the different schools of thought, philosophies, techniques, grammar? There is just so much that holds together this tradition. And if at all there is one tradition, it's plural. And how do we think about this? How do we dialogue about this? And how do we look at what is structure and fluidity that enables these worlds to continually be reimagined? And with that, I think this is a conversation to ponder together more than, I think, what is it that we want to take away? I think it's the conversation itself. It's the pondering together that we could take away. And for me, there are two keywords that I thought are really essential to think about. One is experience or anubhava. And all three practitioners today bring a rich wealth of their own experiences, the way they have engaged with life, and aesthetics as very much a part of that, not something that is completely distinct from it, but entwined with it. And the second is belonging with their own craft, belonging with people, belonging with audiences. And how do we reimagine through these two lenses of experiences and belonging? So I'm going to invite each one of them to take about 5 minutes to share their work and contextualize it for the audience. And from there, we'll move into the question answer route.
Okay, let me start the ball rolling. It's a long journey for me. And especially when we're talking about Indian aesthetics, as the forum says, it's alive and thriving. It'll never be ever stagnated at any point of time. That's my internal feeling as well as my experience over the years. Whether we put them into sockets or put them into compartmentalized situation, it'll grow in multiple directions. As you see, each one of us come from different domain, and all we carry is the same question to answer: where is Indian aesthetic, and what about Indian aesthetic, which is still embedded in our psyche, in our basic existence, as well as, in her complete working, thinking, living, thriving in this century. As an ancient civilization, how old are we in our civilization? How our thought process has been throughout the years, and how we are all about dwelling within the similar situation, and how we have evolved over the centuries, how things have changed, but it's not changed to redefine it, but it's amalgamation of everything put together. It's nothing new, yet redefined, reinvented, collaborated, and continued. For me, the journey begins of aesthetic is that it's not one thing, it's about everything, whether you are existing and you're living, looking, feeling, emotionalizing it, and actually executing it as your practice. I think I'll stop there before everybody else starts putting in few words on that. Thank you.
Ramaji, would you like to go?
Namaste to everybody here. So I'm a dance practitioner, so I am going to speak about my thoughts on just what the topic is, reimagining Indian aesthetics. I am of the opinion that wherever there is creative expression, wherever there is an artistic expression, there's going to be unpredictability, there's going to be innovativeness, there's going to be pushing boundaries, because art is a pulsating, thriving flow of river. So otherwise it would be stagnant and lifeless inside a museum. And like Ushaji said, it's living, it's thriving, it's there. So now if we say that we are now in the 21st century and let us now start reimagining Indian dance and let's now reinvent, have different perspectives, I think we are utterly wrong, because, like I said, dance has been reimagining and recollecting and reinventing from the time it started. 100 years ago, when the community, the specific dance community was dancing in the temples of South India, she had a different repertoire for the temple and she had a different repertoire for the court. And they also interacted with the Western musicians who came in during the colonial regime, not knowing the language and having completely different music systems, but they still adapted. And then when the devadasi system got abolished, the dancers went into smaller saloons and they were patronized by rich zamindars of that area. Again, it was reimagined, because dance is resilient, you see. It always looks for ways and means to survive. And I think that is what has happened to Indian dance. And at every time, the call for reimagining or to reinvent is different. At that time, when India got independence in the 1940s, the most important and crucial aspect was to maintain, to propagate, to sustain the vocabulary of the dance form. That is why it was taught in the pristine form, and the artists from the traditional community stepped out of their comfort zone and started teaching young girls from different communities, from different families. That was huge. That is, again, I would say, a path of resilience, of adapting, readapting yourself to survive. Today, if I'm a dancer, it's because of those practitioners who stepped out of their comfort zone and started teaching dance to people outside the dance community, outside the traditional community. So the need of the hour at that time was to teach the exact vocabulary, and that Alaripu and the Jati Swaram and the Shabdam and the Varnam and the Tillana that was done those days, today, if they are being reinvented and if they are being used to as a medium to develop better, different vocabulary, it's because it's already been done millions of times by thousands of dancers. And if I take up an Alaripu, which is a very, very specific composition from the dance repertoire, and if I try to invent it in a different way, if I look at different vocabulary for it, if I push the boundaries, it's because I have to do it 1,000 times first. We were just talking about that. You need to learn the rules first, and only then you start breaking them, right? So the need of the hour today now, like I said, every time the call of reimagining is different. And the call for reimagining today is different from what it was 75, 80 years ago, when India just got independence. Today, we're dealing with a generation that has excess of information, tremendous access to information. We're dealing with AI. We're dealing with a generation which has a low, they're not able to concentrate and focus, and their attention span is low. So then how do I stick to my dance repertoire and still call myself a Bharatanatyam dancer and still engage with an audience and reach out to them. I think the key word here is being relevant. You need to make your dance relevant to the present times. Now, when I'm teaching the story of Krishna stealing the clothes of the Gopikas, and then they are taking a bath in the Yamuna river, and then Krishna says, ha, 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 you have to stand up and do namaste to me, pranam to me with your hands raised, and only then will I give you the clothes. That little 8-year-old child is going to turn around and ask me, but ma'am, that's wrong. You're not supposed to do that. And that's when, instead of mindlessly teaching these stories to your children, whether it is through story time or through dance, you need to tell them the significance of it. You have to tell them that Krishna actually wanted to tell them that your body is your ego. And the minute you are bereft of that ego and you're not worried about how beautiful you're looking in your clothes, the minute you discard that feeling and you surrender 100% to the Supreme Divine, that is when you will get spiritual realization. Or Krishna dancing with the Gopikas. Why did he romance with so many women? This is a question I'm asked by youngsters. Again, it is our duty as senior practitioners of the dance form to tell them about the real relevance of the Rasa Leela. How that there is just that one divine presence, and that is manifested in every Gopika. So there is just that every Gopika has a separate relationship with Krishna, just as we as human beings have a separate relationship with the divine. So I need to reimagine my content. Now, for example, the Ardhanareshwara Ashtakam. Adi Shankaracharya 2000 years ago wrote about this iconography where half of Lord Shiva represents the male principle and half represents the female principle. Shiva being the dissolver, not the destroyer, but the dissolver, and Parvati being the creator. If she does not create, he has nothing to dissolve. If he does not dissolve, she has nothing to create. So they both complement each other in this crucial balance of creation and dissolution, just like matter cannot be neither be created nor destroyed, but it just keeps changing its form. And Shiva and Parvati describe that. And there is a Shiva and there is a Parvati in every body. So when I dance the Ardhanareshwara, I just don't only talk about Shiva having the Shiva, to have one half body being Parvati and one half being the Shiva. I always talk about the significance of the Ardhanareshwara Ashtakam. So I'm talking about gender sensitivity. I'm talking about gender fluidity here. So there are many, many such stories that, for example, the one on Sita, the image of Sita that is fed to us on television is that this image of this woman who is always crying and she's very sad and she's always, like a doormat and she's subjugated. But in this particular song where Ram says that I'm going off to the forest for 14 years and you're not coming with me, instead of crying and, pleading to him and saying, please take me with you, she turns around and literally like a lawyer, she point by point argues with him. And she says, Yeppadi manam tunindado, she says in Tamil. How dare you think about going away to the forest? Remember that this earth will not bear this injustice. Again, Sita being the daughter of the earth. So she's actually trying to say that any society that does not respect its women is doomed. And then at the end she says, Iduvo aan pillaikku veeram, is this the sign of a true man? She asks. So I make it a point to talk about these women characters, reimagine them, re-portray them. I think it is my responsibility to make dance relevant, to make dance as therapy. It's used for mental health. I know of an organization, several organizations that take dance to the older generation who have dementia, and it has helped them so much. So we need to take it beyond just a visual spectacle, just entertainment, and we need to look at it as medium of education, medium of communication, and a medium to address issues around you. I cannot be oblivious. I cannot be living in my cocoon and produce art. I cannot produce art by living in a cocoon. I need to have that osmotic activity with the world around me, because they say that that art reflects life. And I think that is exactly what we need to reimagine aesthetics, especially Indian dance. We need to be aware of the world around us. We need to reflect the world around us. And the crucial word here is we need to make ourselves relevant. We need to make the content relevant if we want to engage with the next generation.
Thank you, Ramaji. Suket ji, please.
There is so much to learn when you're sitting with people like Ramaji and Usha ji. So Usha ma'am has been my teacher, mentor from NIFT. She taught me. That's how I've known her for a long time. Growing up in this land, there are so many things we take for granted, which you only get to realize once you step out of this land sometimes. And I have been fortunate enough to have gotten to travel and been in situations where I have explored and gotten influence from the West. And there came a time when I was working on a project which was something like a competition of an international scale called the International Bullmark Prize. So this realization is from that particular time. Although I was using Indian crafts, I was in my work. I'm a fashion designer, so I was working with Indian textiles. And this is something we were talking backstage, that during the preparation of this competition, I realized that, I'm going to be competing with Koreans and Australian people and Scandinavian designers and American designers and people from all over the world, Japanese designers. And I can't beat a Korean guy at Korean. I mean, I can beat the Korean guy in Hindi or Punjabi. Translating that into textiles, I can't do what they have been doing in their traditional format. And I can't play on their strengths. I have to play on my strengths. And that's when I became aware of the importance of Indian textiles, Indian crafts, and Indian influence on my aesthetic. And when you become aware with awareness, Ramaji told me and pointed out, comes intent. And she pointed that out, and I want to specifically thank her for giving me that word, yes. And when the intentions are right, the communication becomes very, very strong. And that helped me find a specific identity. I don't need to take the Indian with me. The Indian comes out on its own because I was born here. I grew up with my grandmother and my mom and dad. I was brought up in this house. So I never felt the need to pick up a flag and say elephants and camels and paisleys and India. So whatever I do, it is India anyway. So it's subconsciously there. And evolution. For all of us creative people, evolution is the key anyway. I mean, it's given. In case of Indians specifically, this is it's a special case where we have to devolve to evolve. Because there's this memory that has been suppressed. I mean, British were masters of suppressing a consciousness. And somehow digging from our past, you realize how important environment is to our civilization, how important the equality between sexes has been in our civilization, how important participation of men and women when it comes to many things, their contribution to Shastras and writing the Vedas, and how there were rishis and rishikas contributing. All of this has been a new discovery which should have actually been obvious. And the newest realization was that, okay, because of our education system, because of the 250-year rule of the British, somehow even our perspective has become anthropocentric, which is human-centric. Whereas our civilizations in Eastern Hemisphere, from India till Japan, the traditional civilizations have been informed from a very eco-centric way of looking at the world. So, and Usha ma'am pointed out that, how things are very, very local. And obviously, when you're ecologically sensitive, you'll eat what grows around you. You'll wear what grows around you. You'll be informed. Your influences will be from the things that happen immediately around you. You don't really feel the need to conquer the oceans or conquer the river or conquer the nature. You coexist with the nature. And that's the quintessential difference between anthropocentric and ecocentric. And that has been a bit of a discovery, and I wish it weren't a discovery. I wish that were taught to us in school. I wish that was a part of our school curriculum, not just an informal system coming from my grandmother and mother. I mean, then you can actually progress with leaps and bounds. This is almost like you have to relearn and spend 15 years after your formal education on re-educating yourself on your traditions, which you can actually use as your strength to take to the world. It's just one step that we can avoid, I think. So, yeah.
Can I interject here?
Yes, please.
I think what Suket is dealing with it is that he's wishing that it was earlier and it was evolving. It has to be there, taught, and then realize situation would be faster. Unfortunately, to contradict a bit little here, is that you need to have an experience. It's a all deal or play of experience. The experience which really makes a personality into a being what a person is through different environment. That's why we are all different. It's not we are breathing different air. It's not that we are doing something different. We having 2-3 meals, all of us together. But why are we different? We are different because the environment was different. Why are we different? Because our experiences are different. And why do we gauge certain things as a certain space of time? Because we have matured some little more than last time. So every time it has a mind, it has a space, it has a something which keeps you evolving over the century. That's how the whole Indianness is all about. It's not dictated, it's experience. It's there. And the more you experience, that's what you say, over the years, you don't have to, understand the taste of a cake while eating the whole thing. But you have to be conscious, even eating a spoonful, if you're aware. Then you know what it is you're eating. You don't have to do the whole thing. So you have to be mature enough to gauge that. That's what I feel is something, even if we taught certain things in school level or college level, it takes hell of a long time for them to realize what they learned in college was not this. It was actually they meant to be like this. Now I understand what they were talking. And that time at the college duration, because I've been an academician for years, I can talk about years and years of my experience. They only learn when I see a person like Suket, ask him how regular was he in college and how well he's understood. I'm questionable. The reason is that that generation did not understand what we were bringing in for. Either our teaching was not complete because we didn't bring it to the level where they needed to understand, or we were talking something which was not their experience. So Indian context is so rich in his own content that it is very difficult to touch upon everything together. It has to be given in a slow dosage. Till you experience that, you move on. And it keeps evolving. That's what I said. It needs breathing. It's a living. It's evolving. There's lots to gauge and lots to give on. But I still would go with this. It's a rich culture, which is not religion. It is the way of life. As Suket pointed out, it's a geography that dictates term, or it's an anthropology which dictates term, or it's atmosphere which dictates term. It's everything put together. When a person is creating a pot in Indian context, what is he creating that pot for? He has to put that on some chula or some angithi or something like that. So what kind of a form and shape would he be doing? Nobody taught him what the form and structure and material could be. It was a need of the day, and he discovered. Somewhere it is mitti, somewhere it is a kasa, somewhere it is a pital, and so on. It kept evolving. Different states, different stuff, different experience, different manner, and everything moves on. And then the beauty of it is we keep learning from each other. This is discovered, so let's move ahead. So I think it's the way of our life. It's a complete cycle of our life, how we live, experience, thrive, reimagine, recreate, co-create, say whatever you want. But it's a living tradition for all of us. I think, thank you.
Just give a quick rebuttal. मेरे को लगा मैं थोड़ा सा misunderstood हूँ इस situation में. We were having this conversation a while back regarding how people in Indian villages live. They live in houses that are made from local materials, in houses that adapt to the environment and the seasons, and the local flora and fauna, insects and all of that. The houses have coats of materials on them that repel certain insects in certain seasons and all of that. So now what is actually happening is that there is an argument made that those people have the right to live in the kind of houses they like to live in. We should not be imposing the idea on them that, oh, they should continue living in mud houses, or they should maybe build a concrete house. To everybody his own. But my point is that it's too costly for the future generations for this experiment. This is a Western experiment, to each their own. You know what concrete has caused. So I am giving that as an example, that if you let every village person build a concrete house and then later on realize the mud house was, by that time we would have destroyed the planet. There are 1.4 billion people only in India. So the number of concrete houses which will have to be built for them to realize, oh my God, our old systems are better. And that's where I'm saying that it is very, very important. If the whole world is realizing what ecological housing means, it's time we make it cool already. And that happens at primary education. And my misunderstood part was that I got the education of Indian crafts and textiles in NIFT. So there I have no complaints about. But the thing I was complaining about, the primary education. So when we were growing up from school till, so ma'am, आपने जो पढ़ाया वहाँ पे problem नहीं थी.
I think, it was just fascinating, as all of you would agree. The kind of conceptualization of lived experience that each of them have been able to distill and tell us. I think the first point that Usha ji made, that you can't put this into the box. You can't say tradition is this, and define it and expect it to grow. You have to let it be, and you have to let it emerge from there. And at the same time, both Sukhbir ji and Ramaji have said, what does it take for today's generation? What do you think about when you say, here's attention span that is limited? What do you do when, climate change is happening, every other day is environmental destruction? How do you start framing and positioning this for the younger generation? Where does reimagining really lie? And I think a lot of very interesting ideas have emerged in the way they have framed it. So to perhaps go deeper into the questions, where I think this question of what do we reimagine or reinterpret, as you said, Ramaji, for the next generation. And when we say there is a lived ethos, that ethos is changing. Somewhere where you might say, I went to my grandmother's place and I picked up something. Is it truly happening today? When we say that a lot of it we were able to just, sort of breathe in the culture as it was. Is it really the same, or are we getting so many other things that there's perhaps an identity crisis for the younger person when they say, what is Indian? And is it really this past as they claim it, or this living, ongoing continuity that we look at? So Ramaji, I would like to first pose this question to you, because you're working with mythological narratives, you're working with literary narratives, you're looking at philosophical and metaphysical concepts, and you're reinterpreting them. So where do you find this juncture between, that past as considered past and this living, moving tradition and taking it into the future? So where would you locate that?
I think the most important thing as a teacher of dance, and especially when you're teaching younger kids and even teenage kids, I think the most important thing is first to make them understand that this is not an old art form, because yesterday's experiment has become today's tradition. And today we experiment something, it becomes tradition tomorrow. So it is something which is, constantly flowing. So this is a living, present, contemporary tradition, culture of the country. And we are engaging in it like the way you engage in swimming, like the way you engage in learning tennis, like the way, just like that, you learn Bharatanatyam. Yes, it is a dance form which possibly originated thousands of years ago, hundreds of years ago. But then our concern today is that today it is a contemporary dance form. It is being danced by contemporary people, by today's people. So that whole concept that this is old and this is redundant and nobody's going to understand me when I dance, I think that misconception has to be removed. And one has to engage them, like I said. The content has to be engaged with them. Like, for example, I wanted to do something about, saving the planet. The planet is like Mother Earth. She's like a mother. She's ever compassionate. She's protective, and let us be mindful of this planet. And simple things like let's save electricity, let's save water, let's say no to plastic, because this whole ground is like the womb of a mother. Now, just by standing there and preaching to them, they're not going to understand. We need to show them visuals. So I was inspired by a seal from the Harappa civilization. It's a small figurine of a woman. She's lying like that, and there's a plant which is growing vertically up against gravity, vertically up from her womb. So I tell my students, now look at what the thought process during the Harappa civilization was, that they looked at this earth as a mother who produces children. And just like that, this womb is the mother, the womb of the mother. And from here, every vegetation that comes out is a child. So then we did this little exercise in my workshop where I said, let's look for the heartbeat of the child, of the seed inside. Just like as you look for heartbeats of the mother inside, of the child inside your mother's belly, when she is gestating, let's look for the heartbeat of the seed that is growing. And then they found it so exciting. And then so these little tools, I think, would answer your question about how you take dance out of the classroom, because we learn a very, very solid vocabulary in dance. And then my whole thing is learn the technique and throw it out of the window. Because It's only then can you, again, reimagine and reinvent and make it again. I cannot say enough of this, that make it relevant for today. So that was just a small example I gave of how we can engage with the next generation by giving them tools of solid tools and backing it, with these visuals and telling them why we are doing it. Why are we telling these stories about Krishna stealing clothes and stealing butter? What is the symbolism behind it? What is the symbolism behind the Ardhanareshwara Ashtakam? It's about gender equality. We're talking about reservation in parliament for women. And here we are 2000 years ago, Adi Shankaracharya literally must have, I think, made the first reference to gender equality and gender sensitivity. So I think bringing in scriptures and bringing in stories through dance, that is why dance has become so important. And I think we need to have dance and music compulsory up to a certain age in every school. I went to Jaffna in Sri Lanka and I saw that Bharatanatyam and Carnatic music was compulsory till the child comes to grade 10. So I think it is so important to engage in an art form. It could be tabla, it could be sitar, it could be Bharatanatyam, it could be Kathak. Because I feel that gives the child an identity of being a part of a tradition, a part of a culture. And I think when you're talking about dance and moving into space, moving into abstract space and searching for something in that space while you're dancing, first of all, you are away from screen time. And secondly, your imagination grows. And I think Amishji spoke about an imagined society, how important it is to sufficiently imagine yourself to be part of. I thought that was really nice. And I think I would really recommend keeping dance and music compulsory as an activity in school.
And it's just phenomenal. About 40 minutes before we came to the session, we were discussing and the fluidity of conversations across the panelists and the sort of ethos in which each of them brought so many reflections to the table has been very inspiring. And to me, I think it's great that we have a teacher and a student together today as practitioners in the field. And I would invite both of you together for this question. I think what's been very interesting for me in looking at education as a space is what does it take to kindle imagination? And what does it take to create the spaces or the environment for immersion for the student from which, the seeds that you have laid, you're waiting for it to sprout. It may not, you don't know. And there is this sort of, like going on an adventure. Where you just lay out all the possibilities to the student and you leave it to emerge. And I'm curious, especially with Indian aesthetics, as Ramaji was pointing out, there is so much abstraction, there's so much symbolism, there is so much that we speak in story, we speak in paradox, and all of this becomes part of how we create. So how do you create that immersive environment and what's the dialogue that happens?
I think I have colleagues sitting right there, right, bang opposite me and smiling. So I think we've been at it for a very long time. It's a beautiful situation. I enjoy every bit of it. When a student, is thrown in a swimming pool without any lessons on swimming, how does it try to survive? It's something similar. We give them a task, this is my way of teaching. Give them a task, we just tell them the tools, and we wouldn't tell them anything about how to approach it. And they'll crib about it, they'll spend a lot of time, and they would, argue, and they said, no, we don't know how to go about it. Anyway, all that, if I put aside, it's the open-endedness of the situation that makes a student actually apply. And he's struggling to apply. And when he achieves that outcome, how happy is he? Because it's he who's doing it. And that is what the situation he'll never, ever forget. It's not taught, it's not tutor, it's not mentor, it's he discovering. So offering him the situation, offering any student a space where they can discover their own identity at the same time using the tools of the required project that he is supposed to be dealing with. I don't know whether I'm clearing it up. Once again, I'll try to reiterate it is, there is a problem. If we may put up, it could be personal problem, it could be societal, it could be political, it could be any. And then how does one deal with it? What does one do with it? So they may have read it, or they would go and read about it, how to solve it. And just imagine 30 of them coming differently, talking about the similar situation and discussing in the class and bringing something. They argue, they negotiate, they co-understand, they co-create. And suddenly the information which is brought in together through God knows wherever, through asking question to their peer or the parents or from internet or ChatGPT or God knows where, and they come and talk about it in the class. And after that, what happens? That is what the melting pot is all about. When they do that, they're bringing in different arguments altogether. And when they are analyzing it and substantiating it, it becomes a knowledge. So the information turning into knowledge and substantial knowledge is the task. That is what I'm in the classrooms. And usually the classrooms are the place where everybody is given enough space, enough breathing space, mental space, physical space to actually exert their own personal identity. It's not the tutored, it's not the teacher, it's not the something who has been descriptively told to them. It's they discovering, they understanding, they finding out, ultimately taking them to audience or taking them to the context or taking them to material understanding or taking them everywhere and then bringing back the knowledge which becomes more consolidated, more holistic and more understanding. And that is what is one part of the question what you asked me. The second part, what I feel is very important also, the present scenario and contemporizing it through the traditional route, if we may say. It could be either traditional route to contemporary or contemporary route to traditional. Usually the task with the textile designer, as with the product designer, any part of designer, or so with the visual artist. What does one say that? We see it, we do get inspired, we feel certain things is looking beautiful. And why are they looking beautiful? What is beautiful all about? Does it have a context? Does it have a social context? Does it have people to listen to? Does it have a material sensibility or understanding? Why are you finding beautiful? Looking at stuff which you think is looking good is not enough. It has to be thrown out of the box. Till you have 150 questions to be answered. Why? So once you have why, you've been able to analyze not only one little aspect, whether it's traditional, contemporary, or whichever situation it is situated, but then once you understand the tool of analysis and synthesis, you would understand to do everything. Another thing I want to put it up, it's a great to say how to bring the contemporariness into traditional attire or systems or in aesthetics. I rather would blur that line completely. There's no traditional, no. It's your sensibility, you want to say, because you're brought up in such a situation that you have a sensibility to appreciate certain things which you feel embedded with, you feel oneness with, and automatically you'll pick up that. And once you go in detail of that particular stuff, you would realize why do you like it and how much to pick up from the tradition, how much innovation would go into that, and where do I stop and where it's enough. In Indian, thank you. In Indian context, we've been labeled in India, the more is less compared to Japanese sensibility with less is more or Western philosophy. And why not? Isn't it the beauty? What's wrong with it? Do it, but do it with sensibility. Do it with the sense. Do it with the acquired knowledge. Then it makes sense. Don't try to put in everything in one plate and start eating the whole thing themselves. How much, how little, how proportionately you can embed. So all these are aesthetically very, very valid questions. I can go on for the ages about all that, but I think I need to give chance to Suket to speak. and ask me a question, I would be very delighted to ask or answer any one of you, Rama or Vid. So it's a pleasure to talk about traditional versus contemporary, contemporary versus traditional, and where we do stand in the new students or the new generation who's come up. They do not know the tradition. Of course they know the tradition because they've been born there, they've been taught there, that the parents are there. Some kind of a tradition doesn't mean very strict ruled discipline. Tradition means a very flow, very beautiful. It's a breathe, it's a breath that you dwell with, and you just bring in as much as you want and how much you want. I think I should stop. Suket.
I just understood in what she said in her first answer to her first question of why I felt so empowered when she gave us an exercise to do, and there were no guidelines. There was no context, nothing. They was just told we have to do something, and then we had to figure out on our own. And the sense of achievement when we came back with our answers and realizing there was no wrong answer there. And that's what life is, actually. And although our reaction, my initial reaction was that we had grown up with so much instruction that not receiving instructions to do an exercise was alien at that very moment. And she made me realize how unimportant that was. Once you know the rules, there are no instructions that need to be given. And that's what she explained, that let them swim. I will give an example taking from what Ramaji had said and Usha ma'am said. I'll explain with an example of what my process is and how I work and how I create things. And that will answer many things in its own way. I was telling Ramaji, my son had turned about 8 or 9 years old 4 years ago, 8 years old. And I thought this was the right time to start talking about Panchatantra stories to him. I don't know why 8, but it just thought, okay, this is the right time. And I got a Panchatantra book and I realized, okay, there are 86, 87 stories in there. And I started telling them stories. And as I was reading out the stories to them, I also had a thought that why aren't there more illustrations and why doesn't this book look pretty? And I started, I came back to my studio and I asked my assistants to start working on illustrating the Panchatantra stories. That's what I'm wearing right now. The first 5 stories, this print is designed from the first 5 stories of the Panchatantra. And while I was telling my son these stories, I was learning Panchatantra, the lessons behind those myself. There's a story about the monkey and the crocodile, where the monkey asks the crocodile to help him cross the river. And they become friends. And one day he asks him for help to cross the river. And that's day he decides that he's going to take him home to his wife who wants to eat monkey's heart. And none of them is dishonest to each other. None of them is cheating each other. Everyone is actually sort of playing by their own nature. And in that innocence, the crocodile also tells the monkey that, you're going home and my wife wants your heart. And then monkey then devises a plan and he said, I can't go empty-handed. And then he climbs a tree to get jamun and tells the crocodile to go be on his way. Now, we always sort of, at least let me talk about myself. When I was growing up, I understood that, okay, the crocodile was bad and the monkey was stupid. There was none of those things. Quintessentially, this story teaches you a lesson of you have 10 friends. You need to know which friend to ask for what kind of help. So if you have a medical problem, you call your doctor friend. You can't call your engineering friend to solve that problem for you. Because if you do, then you'll end up losing a friend and hurting yourself. Like imagine your leg is hurting and you call your engineer friend. At the end of the day, you'll tell him that tu kaam nahi aaya mere, tune meri help nahi kari. So you end up, it's your own fault when you lose a friend and when your friend lets you down. So all of these things are in your own control. So Mitra Bheda is the lesson behind the differentiating between friends and how not to be disappointed. It's all on your own. It's all in yourself. So how our traditions inform our present and the future of our social dynamics and realities that have already been coded in these simple stories about animals, and how I could incorporate them in my fashion expression. And why do I incorporate stories in my fashion? Now that is now answer to that question will relate to, or circle back to what Ramaji was talking about: nature, earth, planet, nature. Now there are certain things that we take as Indians, we take for granted. Natural fibers and natural materials. We've grown up with them. Our environment only allows us to wear natural textiles. I mean, if I wear polyester or nylon in the Delhi's heat, there'll be bad body odor. There's this huge amount of problems. There's skin problems and all of those things. So natural fibers are things that you wear them effortlessly. So I never sort of plan my collection keeping environment in mind. Those are things which I take for granted, that I have grown up so responsibly कि हमें खाना waste करना नहीं है, हमें कपड़े waste करने हैं. These are the values we've been brought up with. So I don't have to actually really think about the environment. It's deeply encoded in our psyche. So that is the reason why I actually tell stories of how to make these clothes relevant to people, so that they build relationships with these clothes. They don't go out of fashion. They can wear it for 10 long years, 15 years, as long as the product would last. Because there's a story attached to it. There is a certain relationship you build with the little piece of garment that you wear. So you don't feel like throwing it. It reminds you of something. So that's what informs my design process. Yes.
I mean, I think it's a pleasure to hear the details and how, how many layers there are to the practice, and yet how seamless it becomes when you're just, creating something. And I think the key word for me is story. The whole idea that you tell a story, and what you want to convey is there because you've shared something, and that sharing and belonging emerges in this great way of storytelling. And whether it's textiles, whether it's image that we create, whether it's dance, this something about this tradition really has focused on the narrative, and also the non-narrative as narrative. And I think that's that paradox between narrative and non-narrative is very interesting. Just very quickly, I want one more round, maybe like a very short question answer round of the dialogue between the inner and the outer in your own practice. We've heard about it, but I'm wondering succinctly if you had to say what keeps you holding on to the practice that you have, and what is it that you feel gives you a chance to keep something that is your own sort of very spiritual practice in some sense with the form that you have, and at the same time taking it to the audience, taking it to a student. So what is that space between the inner and the outer? And I think all of you, if you could.
I do what I do, design, fashion, textiles, all of this. I do it because of my livelihood. This is the only thing I know. I'm good at it. And while I'm at it, it doesn't feel like work. But it is my livelihood. Why do I continue doing it? The sense of achievement when you feel, or when you find out something as if you've discovered something. With creative thing, when you're onto something, there's this sense of achievement that comes. And especially with a person like me who's sort of working in its own silo, I don't know what's happening around the world, what other designers are creating. I almost feel like an inventor. Even though it is not the most unique thing that I've created, 10 other people might have created it. But there is that sense of achievement that, okay, I, through my own journey in life, have arrived at a point or arrived onto a product that we managed to create, which is unique for me at that very moment. And when I bring it out, I realize, okay, there are 3 other people who are working on a similar thing, or there's another person who's gotten to the same conclusion. And for me, that point is so exciting. I want to meet that person and figure out what has been his journey or her journey to arrive at a similar product or an aesthetic or something. So
For me, it is this unwavering trust in the art form. And I believe in it so strongly. And I find it to be so beautiful and so versatile and so giving that I really want every person in this planet to be touched by this art form. So I believe in it. So it's my utmost passion to spread the beauty of this dance. And I think that is what I keep doing, what I do.
Why do I keep doing it? I think that's the question that you asked. I keep doing it. I'm going on doing it every year. So I said, now is the time to retire. No, one more year. So let's go on. It's, you have learned through your experience, multiple tools to execute them with a different generation. And every time you apply it, it's a different result. So next time you do it, okay, now I've cracked it. Let's do it this way now. And at this position now, when I am, heading the entire university, and then it becomes even challenging. Now we are not talking to the student, we are talking of the mentors. So what happens? Your experience, and then you have to convince the mentor, no, this is the best way. Let's try it this way. And it doesn't happen because they have their own heads, of course. I mean, they have all their experience, small or little, whatever, but they have their experience. So how to negotiate this dialogue is what challenges me. And this is what beautiful, how I make them feel I'm listening to them and I'm really completely in agreement with them, yet I get my way through. So that's a trick I've understood. That somewhere there is in between of everything. Inspiration to outcome. So what happens in between? Dialogue to attainment. What happens in between? So that's in between space, which is gray. There's no black, no white. Somewhere in between, I think that becomes my playground. I enjoy that. And year after year, I try to excel in it. And I try to crack it. So I'm able to do it. The moment that things like, it's not going to happen. I say, okay, let's think about it. Let's do it this way. I'm not saying I achieve it every time, but mostly I do achieve. And then that tool, I have got it with me now. I keep applying it. And it's fantastic feeling when I apply it and gives me the results. And it's results for entire community, not me alone, because they've agreed to apply that rule, which I stated, seems to be their achievement too. So it's an achievement, everybody's, and we celebrate that. I think that's my achievement. I go on with it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Can we take maybe 2 questions from the audience? Anybody who would like to?
Thank you very much. Excellent panelists. And this is very close to my heart. I am working for grassroots people, women empowerment, and children education, the girl child. Here with textile, I just an observation. Everybody's answers have been how you want to receive them and accept it. Nobody can touch Indians with its rich tradition and culture. But it was me who have been fighting with the government and with the number one man, Prime Minister Modi ji, that I'm a normal citizen. Whatever is my suggestion must be listened to if I've been given a proper education from home, starting from home first, and then the schooling. So here I just want to say that when you said that it should be a school curriculum, it took me 1 year with Ministry of Education before he retired. It took me 1 year with CBSE trying to get their meeting, but it was challenging for me. So on 19th of April 2019, before Mr. Khuntaya, who was the Secretary Education, he gave the government notification that from nursery till class 12, music, art and culture will be compulsory subject, And from class 8 and 9 will be culinary, Indian culinary, this thing, and that will be added in their results. Some schools are following. This message has not gone out to the rest of the country. Few schools are adopting it, but this is the government notification.
Reference you touched upon introducing drama and arts in school at primary level. It's regarding that Dr. Bharat Gupji, I've been having discussion. He said it should be from the primary, this should be done, then second, the middle level, and before any text as such is introduced like Natya Shastra, this should be part of the curriculum. That's what I just wanted to, when you mentioned just a reference to that. Thank you.
Thank you. Just in the interest of time, we'll call it a day, and I think we would love for others to come in and speak to the panelists during lunch. And very, very quickly to close, I think just keywords that I took away in terms of what does it take to reimagine what is already a continuing reimagined tradition is the in-between space and time, and flow, breadth, dwell, negotiate, surprise, resilience, relevance, interpretation, empower, eco-centric, story, journey, and belong. I think those are, like for me, ways in which we could reimagine. Thank you. Thanks so much to the panelists.